Welcome back. Thank you for viewing the next segment in this video series. Now let's join the group already in progress.
Lesson number 7, evangelistic churches connect their Sunday school small groups to their outreach strategy.
It's really important here that it's not like you got outreach over here as a separate thing, then your Sunday school small groups. Now, we're using the word Sunday school descriptively there, and you may call it by many names, whether it's home groups or on Sunday morning, connect groups or life groups. Don't be taken with the titles here, but more the strategy. Our churches, more than 95% have a small group strategy, and I suggest every church should have a small group strategy. And here in Georgia, Sunday school is still very prevalent in terms of the strategy and even the name. But maybe if you're from another area of the country, we don't think of Sunday school here in Georgia as being something for children, but it's a strategy for all age groups. But think about it this way, Joel. No one's better at reaching high schoolers than high schoolers. Right. No one's better at reaching college-age young adults than college-age young adults. No one's better at reaching senior adults than senior adults. Here we have this opportunity to do what I call team evangelism. They're already gathering in the small groups. So let's be sure we're equipping them to not just simply have Bible study, don't neglect it, but don't stop there. Have that group of high schoolers strategize, plan, and pray how they might go about reaching their peers and sharing the gospel with their peers. Same thing for our senior adult classes. One thing we found out here in Georgia is very interesting. Did you know, Joel, that if every small group or Sunday school class in Georgia in the next 12 months were to reach 2 people and see them saved, we would blow away anything that's ever happened. As a matter of fact, right now it takes about 4 classes or groups to lead 3 people to Christ.
Wow.
The reality is if every class brought 1 to Christ, we'd have a record year. Right. The reason I say to challenge your groups and classes to reach 2, between me and you always have folks who aren't on board. So challenge, and I think that's doable. I think any class or group, and we did something called Power of 10. What if 10 people had 12 months to reach 2 people? And there are resources available on the websites that we'll show in just a little while. And you can get this, it's free, it's downloadable. And you engage your Sunday school or your small groups in evangelism, groups of 10. And sometimes when maybe someone has a fear, whether it's a fear they should have or not, sometimes you're more willing to do something in a group. So Sunday school enables you to do team evangelism. So connect and conduct your outreach through Sunday school. And I'll add this, outreach is more than evangelism. Outreach involves reaching out evangelistically, but also reaching out to the unchurched, meaning perhaps there's somebody new in your community who moved from a neighboring town who's a believer who hasn't connected with the church. Well, there's outreach for believers also, or that person who's dropped out of church or who's struggling. So outreach encompasses more than evangelism, but evangelism should certainly be a component of your outreach.
So really, every Sunday school class, I wanted my leaders, my teacher, administrator, to view it as a small church, basically. It starts with when you recruit that teacher, Steve, Mark, to say to that teacher, we want your class to be evangelistic.
Right.
You know.
Can I add something here too about should we do Sunday school or should we do home groups? And I'm not about to get into a big debate here. I'm for whatever works for your church. Just to say this, there's some thinking that if we get our classes or our groups off campus, we can reach more people. From our research, here's what we found out. If you're not reaching people meeting on the campus, you're not going to reach them meeting off the campus. It's not where you're sitting that leads you to reach people. It comes down to the leadership. So you can be just as inwardly focused meeting in someone's home as you can meeting at 9:45 on Sunday morning. I don't say that to say that you shouldn't have small groups or home groups. I'm saying whether you're meeting on campus Sunday morning before worship or where you're meeting Tuesday night in somebody's home, you've got to, again, lead your classes and groups. Remember I said evangelistic churches are led by evangelistic pastors? Evangelistic Sunday school classes or evangelistic small groups are led by evangelistic small group leaders or evangelistic Sunday school teachers. So it comes down to leadership and, again, intentionality.
I'm going to put you on the spot. You may not know this number. Do we have any idea in the state of Georgia how many small groups there are, how many Sunday school groups there are? Is that a known number?
I'll give you a round number right here. Obviously, I could look it up if we really need to know, but still in Georgia, well over 85% of our churches are still doing a Sunday morning strategy, whether they call it Sunday school or by some other name. So it's right at about 85% in our Georgia Baptist churches
still
right now.
Doing Sunday school.
The Sunday morning right before worship or right after worship.
Sure.
You know, versus a weekday. Now, mind you, we've got about 6% more or so that are doing a combination. They do the on campus and off campus. Okay,
right.
and then a few, you know, more about the same 6 or 7% that do exclusively the small group, and then just a couple of percent that don't do anything small group.
And I know a lot of times for those who don't do it on campus, it's a facilities issue. They don't have the facility, church plants, and those kind of things.
And by the way, as Georgia Baptist leaders, we're proponents of what works for you. We don't say you've got to do this or that, but I would just say this on the Sunday school end. If Sunday school is not going well, you might think, well, let's dismantle the Sunday school and do small groups so we can reach people. But the reality is, if you don't change what you're doing, changing the locations is not the key. You got to change the culture.
You can have a closed group even in somebody's living room.
Right. So don't dismantle until you really look at all the dynamics. And I think, though, even the most traditional Sunday school would do well to have some weekday groups.
Sure.
To reach people you can't reach on Sunday morning.
Sure. Lesson number 8, evangelistic churches go to the homes of evangelistic prospects and recent guests.
Now, this is interesting. This is another one of those 10. I said 2 may be more contextual. This is a second one that may be more contextual to Georgia. But just like revivals, I hear people saying, visitation doesn't work anymore. Well, then why are these churches doing it? Well, I know why they're doing it, by the way. And I want to just tell you a story about when I was serving as a college pastor for about 3 years on the church staff. It was expected that I would go to visitation on Tuesday nights. And Joel and Mark, I would go visitation. I'd go 3 or 4 weeks and not see anybody because I'm going to homes the traditional way. But our church was the leading church in college-age baptisms when I was doing this in the state of Georgia. Here's why. When I would talk to these college students about evangelism, they're thinking, well, that's easy for you to do. You're up at the office every day. That's what they're thinking. By virtue of the fact that they know, and by the way, it's not that I only did evangelism on Tuesday nights at 7 o'clock, but I think because they knew at 7 o'clock on Tuesdays I was committed to go out, it set the tone for the group that we are an outreach group. We are an evangelistic group. Plus, you do have those ministry opportunities, and I have had the privilege of leading people to Christ on visits through my evangelism. The question does come up, should we call ahead or should we just show up? That's another issue. That's not even relevant at this point. It's just to say that these churches, and Mark, what are the stats? They're more inclined to go to visitations, the bottom line, but what are the statistics on this?
It's interesting. We have 3,600 Georgia Baptist churches, as you know. Less than half, only 45% of our churches do any kind of visitation. However, our most effective evangelistic churches, almost 70% have visitation. So the difference is 45% across the board, but 70% of our most evangelistic churches see the value in going to the homes and sitting down in the living rooms with the prospects.
Can I say a couple things about that? First, from a research perspective, 70 versus 45% is huge.
Yes.
If it were 70 versus 67, it would not matter. We wouldn't even point it out. But it begs the other question, well, 30% do not have visitation. Well, that tells you something. No, you do not have to have visitation to be effective evangelistically. But I'll point out the churches that don't have visitation, they're doing these other things. These evangelistic events. They're training their members in personal evangelism. There's this culture of evangelism. They're preaching evangelistically. So we're not saying you have to have visitation. We are saying this. If you're saying visitation doesn't work, I'm sorry, you're not correct about that. These churches, evidently there's something to it. So if you choose to do it like other things, do it well. If you choose not to, be sure you're doing these other things that we're talking about to be sure you're making evangelism the focus.
Let me make a statement, a story, or a comment. One of the things we did was we mailed all new guests a gift in the mail. We spent about $15 to $20 a guest, and we partnered with a company, and we mailed them cookies or brownies or something. The reason we did that was we knew that when we knocked on their door, there was a good chance they weren't going to be home. Both of you alluded to that. Well, I got inside their home with a package, if nothing else, where I blessed them. And I think, Steve, now comment to this, and Mark, you as well. I think a pastor, okay, so we gather 15 people for visitation. They all go knock on doors. Nobody was at home, and they come back, and all of a sudden the pastor feels like a failure. But here's what I tried to say. It's not, don't measure just how many people are home. It's the climate you're creating in your church when you gather people together to go outside the walls.
I think you've got it. I think it sets a tone for your congregation, and especially when the pastor is leading the way. It just sends a message. I think over time, it affects the culture of the church.
Yes.
And that's the
Yes.
bottom line. So I'm an advocate, and the church where I serve now, we do Sunday night visitation, and I am still active in visitation. And so again, churches where I've done interim, sometimes I cannot based on distance. But I'm just telling you, there are churches right now that are still doing it very effectively.
Well, and here's what I used to say a lot of times: don't celebrate results, celebrate obedience.
Right, right.
You were obedient when you came out and shared the gospel. Leave the results to God after that.
Well, we've mentioned what it does to us as a church. It develops a culture of evangelism in the church to do visitation. But what does it say to that person, even the person who wasn't home? Let's say they came to an event that we had at our church, or they visited our church on a Sunday morning, or maybe they came to revival and filled out a card. We go to their home, even if they're not home, and we leave them that gift package. We leave them a note from the pastor that says, thank you so much for visiting with our church. You blessed us with your presence. Here we are. If you have any questions, please contact me. Here's my name. Here's my email address. Here's my cell phone. What does it do to that person?
Right.
What does it say to that person about our church? It says, we love you, we value you.
We care. That's great. All right, lesson number 9. You've been viewing a portion of this subject. Please go to the website and navigate to the next video in this training series.